Chapter 21, Ransom. Around 11 o'clock, grandmother Miss Lacey Thornton rapped the door. Rose, she called, is Mo there? I'm nibblish, and with the cafe draped in crime scene tape, I thought I might dine here today, if she's available. Star looked up from his phone, tracing Gizmo. She dropped by for lunch, he whispered to Deputy Marla. During an investigation? Is she insane? I handed the screwdriver to Deputy Marla. I'll act like I didn't hear that, and that's particularly my grandmother you're talking about, I said. It wouldn't hurt for you to show some respect. I turned to the door. I am here, Grandmother Miss Lacey, I called. Miss Rose is in the garden and Lavender's in town working on his car. Come in and I'll make you a sandwich. Miss Rose has Wonder Bread. The screen door squeaked open. Please don't call me Grandma dear, she said. You know I prefer grandmother. She smiled at Star and extended her hand, which is as fragile as the blue veined as a baby bird. Detective Star, she said. Ma'am, he said, giving her a hand a gentle bump. Would you like a PB&J, I asked her. Don't trouble yourself, dear, she replied. I have a basket of fried chicken and a Buick. Let's spread a tablecloth on the porch. Detective? Deputy? She fastened her smile on Deputy Marla. You are a full deputy, aren't you, dear? Yes, ma'am, Deputy Marla said, standing up straight. Grandmother Miss Lacey Thornton beamed at her. That's wonderful, she said. Won't you join us for a picnic dinner? I will, Dale said, trotting down the hall. I'll get us some iced tea. Thank you, Dale. That would be wonderful. I followed Grandmother Miss Lacey Thornton to the porch and helped spread her yellow gingham tablecloth. She brought a feast: fried chicken, deviled eggs, coleslaw, potato salad, and rolls. As she passed out the plates, Mayor Little drove up the Dinge Jeep. Mind if I join you? He asked, pulling a paper sack from his front seat. Make yourself at home, I said. He tiptoed across the porch, shrugged off his blue jacket, and folded it over the back of the swing. Sorry to hear about the recent unpleasantness, Mo, he said. I would have dropped by sooner, but I'm monitoring the hurricane. I doubt she'll turn this way, but if she does, your civil servants stand ready. I may open the school to refugees. They can have my desk, Dale offered. Mayor Little settled in a swing and smoothed his napkin over his tie as Lavender and Sam roared up the Lavender's GMC. Sam took the steps 2 times and handed me a fishful of dirty daylilies. I do admire daylilies, Grandmother Miss Lacey Thornton murmured. They're as pretty as they are tough. Sam smiled. Yes, ma'am, he said, just like Mo. Gag me, Dale muttered as I headed to the kitchen for a jar of water. By noon, half the town draped themselves over Miss Rose's yard, chatting and eating lunches that they'd brought themselves. Bess and Reverend Thompson nudged in among the Azalea women who claimed the garden table. Atelia Celeste and her mother sat by their Cadillac eating grapes and carrot sticks. Skeeter's folks spread a blanket on the lawn. When Skeeter headed for her family's van, I followed. Skeeter, I need you to check a couple of serial numbers for me. One of $100 bill from Mr. Jesse's, I swallowed hard, and one off of 5. Here, I wrote them down for you, I said, handing her a page from the notebook. I don't know, Mo, she said, looking doubtful. My cousin works drive-through at the bank in Kinston, but I don't think, well, let me see what I can do. The first time Miss Rose's phone rang, everybody froze. Star's in there, I called out. They got a trace on the line. Go ahead with your lunches. They nodded. I moved to the door and pretended not to eavesdrop, and Miss Rose took the call. Oh, hello. No, it's dreadful. My tomatoes have it too. Dale cupped his hand around his mouth. Wilt, he bellowed. Pity, Mayor Little laughed. Lavender balanced his Pepsi on the porch rail. They have a trace on the phone line? What kind of trace? Dale shrugged. Beats me. Involves wires is all I know. It's the latest equipment from Winston-Salem, I said, grabbing a deviled egg. I held the screwdriver so I got a good look. Headphones, dials, and everything. Deputy Marla set it up. She's a genius. Wouldn't surprise me if she went FBI someday. Sam slit open a honey bun with his pocket knife. Mo, if I could go over there and snatch a knot in whoever's taken Miss Lena. If you ask me, have a dab, Lavender interrupted, holding out a package of orange crackers. Star's got us under control, Sam. All we gotta do is keep cool, right, Mo? I nodded, wishing I felt as sure as he sounded. The phone jangled a second time a half hour later, as the lunch crowd packed up. Again, everyone froze. It looked like Miss Rose's yard was full of panicking mannequins. My heart pounded as Dale leaned against the door frame, listening. Telemarketer trying to sell Mama a free vacation somewhere she wouldn't go even if they paid her, he shouted, and folks headed for their vehicles. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Atelia Celeste heading for us. Now what? Hey, she said, placing 2 tall blue bottles on the porch. It looked like she'd gained her composure since we crossed past that church. What are those? I asked. Nice bottles with attractive corks. Right, Dale said, giving her a daredevil smile. Very nice bottles. She gave him a quick smile and looked away. Actually, I've had these in my window, catching sun. They made me think of you, Mo, because the ones you send out are ugly. Vinegar bottles, hot sauce bottles, they look trashy. Who would pick them up? Not me. Maybe not your mother. She looked at me. I thought you might have better luck with these. I hesitated. Was Atilia actually being nice? She blushed. Anyway, I'm tired of them, and the idea is stupid enough to appeal to you, so I brought them by. She glanced at Dale and his hair smooth. You know, Mo, I've always thought you were lucky to have two mothers, she said. Miss Lena plus a fantasy one. The world hit me like a splash of cold water. A fantasy one? Well, maybe fantasy is not the right word. Anna Celeste, Miss Thompson shrilled. She glared, her hands on her bony hips. Coming, mother. Atilia, I said as she started toward her mother. Thanks for the bottles. They're nice. No problem, Moran, she said, and she was gone. Grandmother Miss Lacey Thornton was among the last to finish lunch, primarily because she thought she had slices of her famous homemade coconut cake, which she kept concealed to prevent a riot. Your family is odd but well loved, she said, sliding a piece of cake toward me. I nodded, feeling shy. Lunch was delicious. Thank you for coming. Of course, dear, she said, touching my face. I thank you for having me. The third call came just as she drove away. Mo, Miss Rose called, her voice strained. It's for you. As I walked in, Star whispered, It's Slate asking for you. Normally, I wouldn't ask a kid to do this, but no problem, I said. I'm a professional. He hesitated. Just be polite, stay calm, and keep him talking so we can trace the call. That's all. Don't tell him I'm here, and don't tell him we've identified him. Act natural, Dale whispered, crowding into me. I am natural, I growled, taking the receiver. It felt like my heart would rip through my shirt. I was so scared. Back up, Dale. Give me room to work. You're breathing on me. Deputy Marla held up her hand, halting my words as she adjusted the dial. Now, she whispered, pointing to me like I was on TV. Mo LeBeau speaking, I said. My voice sounded like glass. You better not hurt Miss Lena or you'll have me to deal with. The voice on the phone was faint and scratchy. Is this the Colonel's kid? Of course it's me, reptile brain, I snapped. What do you want? What have we done with Miss Lena? Is the Colonel over there? Are you alone? Are you just spoke to Miss Rose? How could I be alone? I looked around the room. Star and Deputy Marla hunched over their equipment. Miss Rose stood by the bookcase with her arms across Dale's shoulder. Lavender and Sam slouched in the door like hounds. Yeah, I said, except for Miss Rose, I'm alone. Who's this? Star gave me a thumbs up. I'll ask the questions. Who made up that rule? When he didn't answer, I pressed on. You some kind of pervert calling up little girls and asking if they're alone? Because I'm not allowed to talk to perverts. That's a rule. Miss Lena made it for me. If you don't believe me, ask her. She's there, right? In fact, put her on the phone and I'll double check it myself. No answer. You do have her over there, don't you? I demanded, my voice getting louder. Star grabbed for the phone. I turned my back, ducking away from him. Where are you? I shouted. Where's Miss Lena? The phone went quiet, save a distance crackling in the background, an odd sound. Screech! Like a swing on a rusty chain. Slate's voice came back cold and mean. Do you want to see the Colonel and Miss Lena alive again? Of course I do, you idiot, I shouted. Bring them back right now. Star snatched the phone away from me. Hello? This is Detective Joe Starr. Who is this? His eyes narrowed. Well, I just walked in, he said, which is fortunate since I'm the one you need to talk to. He listened. All right, he said, I'll see what I can do, but I need to speak to Lena first, or the Colonel. You choose. Give me that. I got one more to say, I shouted, leaping for the phone. Lavender grabbed me around the waist and dragged me onto the porch and pushed me to the swing. Calm down, soldier, he said. He'd never called me soldier before. My temper settled like ashes around fire. Let Star handle this, he said, sitting beside me. It's his job. You did great, but Star knows the physiological mumbo jumbo. Could you tell anyone? Dale asked. Was it really Slate? I shrugged, awash in misery. I can't ever keep my mouth shut. Why didn't I want to do what Star told me? I guess so. The line was too scratchy and far away. It sounded like, I don't know, like something metal, something creaking. Well, don't worry, Lavender said. They'll trace the call. Turned out they couldn't. It was Slade, all right, Star said a few minutes later as he came up to the porch. Marla says he hung up before she could trace him. I thought we had him, he said, looking puzzled. But he's smart, he said, pulling up a chair to face me. Did you talk to Miss Lena? Not yet, he said. Could you hear her? I shook my head. It's okay. Slate needs her there. For some reason, we'll talk to her next time. I'm sorry, I told him as Miss Rose came onto the porch. I've been working on my temper, but sometimes it feels like my brain's straight wired to my mouth. You did fine, Star said. He hesitated. Mo, what do you know about the Colonel's finances or Miss Lena's? Their money, I shrugged. Well, far as I know, Miss Lena ain't got any. The Colonel got this cafe. I reckon that's probably worth a fortune, I said. I mean, it's creekfront. What do you think, Miss Rose? That cafe? She waggled her head. Probably worth about 80,000. Dale whistled between his teeth. I didn't know you were rich, he said. 80,000, is that all? Star asked. She nodded. Look around you, detective. This isn't Winston-Salem. Dirt's still dirt around here. Star rubbed his eyebrows like he could coax an idea out of it. $80,000, he muttered. Does the colonel have other assets? Real estate? Stocks? I shook my head. He mostly pays cash for the the Crisco can. Slate's asking for the ransom, he said, watching my face. When a kidnapper asks for ransom, he thinks the family can pay it. But in this case, a ransom, Dale gasped. How much? $500,000, he said, and Miss Rose sat down hard beside me. Lavender gulped. $500,000? The colonel ain't got that kind of money. Shoot, everybody in town together ain't got that kind of money. I know, Star said, but Slate thinks he does, and he seems to think Mo knows how to get her hands on it. Me, I cried. I'm an allowance and tips. With I get docked almost every week for a sloppy room keeping. I'm lucky to get $5. Dale's face went pale. What what if she can't come up with that? He said. Slate already killed Mr. Jesse. He won't he wouldn't kill. I felt it coming like if you could feel a storm before it hits. Mo, Star said again. Can you think of anything that might help me? I meant to say no. Instead, I threw up grandmother Miss Lacey Thornton's fried chicken and deviled eggs all over the porch, all over my daylilies, and all over Star's perfectly shined black leather shoes. Chapter 22, A Town Full of Nobodies. I woke up snuggled deep in Miss Rose's feather bed, sunlight filtering through her lace-trimmed curtains and playing along her faded wallpaper. Mo, Dale whispered rapidly, softly the door. You up? Yeah, I called. Come on in. He peeked around the corner. You through barfing? Dale can't tolerate other people throwing up. He gets what's known as synchronized heaves. Lavender says if they ever make an Olympic sport, Dale's an automatic for the gold. He placed a paper towel covered plate on the bedside. Tomato sandwich, he said. I made it the way you like it. Fat, homegrown tomatoes, double mayo, salt, and pepper. Dale and Miss Rose eat a lot of homegrown. They start their seeds early in a hot box around back. Thanks, I said. I'm starving. I polished off the sandwich in a record time, wiped my mouth, and settled back against the pillows. It's quiet, I said. Where is everybody? Mama went to the Snow Hill to see a lawyer, he said. A lawyer? Who's in jail this time? Nobody. It's about getting Daddy moved out. For good, I mean, he said, not meeting my eyes. She said not to worry, so I ain't. Dale can choose not to worry like he chooses not to wear socks. Miss Lana says I have more of Jack Russell brain. I think things apart for sport. I glanced at the clock in the mantel. Miss Rose needs to wind her clock. No, he said, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning is right. I sat bolt upright. It's Friday morning? Yep, you slept all Thursday afternoon and all night too. Mama said you were worn slam from the worry. Friday? My life settled around me like a net of bad dreams. I couldn't breathe. Had they found Miss Lena? Not yet, he said, looking away. The colonel? He shook his head. I stared at the embroidery on Miss Rose's bedspread until I was sure I wouldn't cry. Where's Star? Where's Deputy Marla? He's in town and she's in the living room. Star says Marla can handle Slate if he calls, he said. He perched gingerly on the side of my bed, leaving himself a shot at the door. I tried to settle down. It's a pretty room, Miss Rose's, with no signed Dales of Daddy. An old-time clock on the mantel, a soft-buttoned chair on the window, a desk against the wall. A gust of wind sent papers fluttering from the desk to the floor. I got it, I said, rising and patting across the worn wool rug. I scooped up the pamphlets, glad to have something to focus on. Hey, we all going on vacation? His face lit up. Are we? Looks like it, I said, scanning the brochures. Farm Life Museum, a tobacco museum. Sounds boring. So don't come with us, he said, taking them from my hands. Come on, Mo. Mama didn't take your barfing self into her room so you can rummage through her desk, he said, cleaning the desktop. I got to the water Cleo and fixed the broke down stuff at the barn. He said, you want to watch? We can discuss Miss Lena's case. I'm not much for watching, I said, sliding my feet into my sneakers, but I'll help. I opened the door and ran square into Deputy Marla. What are you doing here? I asked, an uneasiness tickling in the back of my neck. Me, she grinned, tucking her hair behind her ear. I was coming to check on you. How are you feeling, Mo? Better, I said. Jumpy, I guess. Has Slate called? No, she said calmly, but he will. We're ready for him, and we have people searching. No news is good news, right? It sure didn't feel that way. Slate wants money. Why hasn't he called? I asked. She slid her arm across my shoulders. Come have a glass of tea with me, she said, herding me toward the kitchen. Both of you. She followed around the kitchen like it was her own, filling glasses with ice as Dale and I sat at the table. She slid each of us a glass of tea and sat beside me. Mo, she said, I've been thinking. Slate believes the colonel has a ton of money. Her eyes searched my face. That means a safe, a lockbox, a bank book. If you have any idea, I ain't ever heard of it, I told her. $500,000 is crazy. Why would the colonel have that much money? Yeah, Dale said, and spit an ice cube back into the glass. The only way he can get that much money would be to rob a. Oh, the only colonel ain't a thief, I said. Deputy Marla tilted her head, watching me. I don't think he is either, she said, but Slate's asking for $500,000, exactly what he and the accomplice stole at Winston-Salem 12 years ago. An odd coincidence, wouldn't you say? I wouldn't, since the money from Slate's heist was never recovered. I didn't answer. Mo, she said, it's hard being alone. I know. I want to find the colonel and Miss Lena for you. So please, try to remember anything the colonel said or done that might help us. A bank account, a hiding place, it's important. Dale leaned away from her. She already said she don't know, he said. Plus, Mo's a kid. If somebody's thinking, I think it should be you and Star. She hesitated. Of course, she said softly. She slid her hand to mine. I'm sorry, sweetie, she said. Sometimes I go overboard trying to help. Tell me what you two have planned for today. I pulled my hand away. We got chores. You want to come? Dale offered. He pointed out the window at his mule, Cleopatra, who stood in the pasture munching grass. Cleo's a great mule. She's half Tennessee Walker. You can water her if you like. Deputy Marla's grin made her look younger. I just might take you up on that one day. Where are you two working? At the tobacco barn, he said. She poured herself another glass of tea. We'll stay where I can see you, and if anything happens, call me. Understand? I'm stuck by the phone until Slate calls. We headed for the door. That was weird, Dale said, as Queen Elizabeth slunk out of the hiding and fell in beside us. What's all that about her knowing what it's like to be alone? She's an orphan, I said. She told me. He frowned. Why would she tell you that? Because I told her about my upstream mother and how I ain't found her. I said, Deputy Marla and I got a lot in common. He snorted. No, you don't. She's playing you. Playing me? Why would she? There ain't nothing to win. Yes, there is. You just can't name it yet, he said. Believe me. She's as much a con as my Uncle Mike, and he's doing 3 to 5. You just don't trust her because she's law enforcement. He shrugged. Suit yourself. He slung a stick into the tobacco field. Fetch it, Liz, he said. Good girl. We walked the rest of the way in silence. Skeeter showed up a half hour later, swinging the battered case. Hey, she said, I caught a ride with Mama so I wouldn't miss up your phone tap. She brought y'all broccoli casserole. I gasped. Broccoli casserole? Your mama's death dish? Dale said, looking up from a tangle of worn clotheslines at his feet. Who died? What have you heard? Nobody, she said quickly. Gosh, I'm sorry, Mo. Everything's fine. We just didn't know how to bring for kidnapping, but that seems to come for people when somebody goes away. Anyway, hope you like it. Thanks, I said, my heart finding its unusual pace. That's nice of you all. She opened the attach. Anyone I wanted to report. We checked those serial numbers, Mo. The C note from the church is hold-up money. Dale whispered, so Mr. Jesse was in on the heist? He was at least in the loot, she said, but the $5 bill was clean. It was? Suddenly I felt like $500,000, even if I couldn't lay my hands on it. Great. $5 bill, Dale asked. What 5? Tell you later, I said. Thanks, Skeeter. Don't thank me, she said. My cousin at the bank's drive-thru couldn't do a thing. Thank Aunt Celeste. Her great aunt on her mother's side runs a bank in Wilmington. Sal talked to her for you. She glanced at the house. Deputy Marla and Skeeter's mother were walking to the van, chatting like old friends. See you, desperados. As Skeeter strolled away, Dale picked a gnarl of reins and began teasing the knots apart. I could feel the anger rolling off his silence. Now what? Oh yeah, right, the $5 bill. I guess you're wondering about the 5 spot, I said. He didn't look up. It's the emergency 5 from my suitcase, the one that's always been there. I kind of thought it might be a clue. And you didn't tell me because I didn't know, I said. Even to me, it sounded like a lie. You thought maybe the colonel wasn't on the heist, so you had the never run without telling me, he said, in his voice flat. What if it had come back the other way? What if it was part of the loot? You were going to tell me then? When I didn't answer, he shook his head. I thought we were partners, he said. We are. I didn't tell you because I didn't know. I should have, I said. His fingers worked the knots, pulling, tugging. Give me a break, Dale. Deputy Marla's right. If I can't figure this out, I'm alone. I got nobody except for an upstream mother I can't find. Nobody? He dropped the reins and stared at me so angry his lips went pale. You got people driving out here to sit with you, bringing you food. You got Skeeter helping. You got Sal breaking her family rules for you. You got Anna Celeste helping, and she can't stand you. You got me and Mama and Lavender. You got a town full of nobodies, in a case you haven't noticed, he said, his voice picking up stream. I am sick of hearing about your upstream mother. You think you're the only person that ever got thrown away, he said. You think Anna Celeste doesn't get thrown away every other time her mother looks razor blades at her? You think I don't get thrown away every time Daddy? He clapped his mouth shut. He sat there looking like a tired, angry old man, and then he jumped to his feet and brushed past me, heading for the house. An hour later, I tapped on the door of Lavender's old room. Dale, I whispered in a porcelain knob and pushed the door open a whisper. Can I come in? If you want to, he said with his voice like frost. He sat sideways in an overstuffed chair by the window, his legs over the chair arm, lifting through a back issue of NASCAR Illustrated magazine. Liz curled by his chair. I'm sorry, I said. Really? He said, squinting at a photograph. I sighed. Dale can be stubborn. I know how much you and Miss Rose and Lavender do for me, I said. I appreciate it. I know this ain't a great time for y'all with your daddy acting the way he is. He turned the page. I hate him for hitting you, Dale. He shrugged. Nobody said nothing about, I've seen the marks. If he tries it around me, I'll take him down. He cocked an eyebrow. I'm a born scrapper, plus I have karate skills, I reminded him. He looked up, finally. He's twice as big as you are, Mo, and he ain't likely at karate night. When Daddy hits, he means it, and he's getting worse. That's why Mama's thrown him out. Mr. Lee says no matter how big the enemy, don't hit him unless he's aimed to kill, Mo. He said, looking me full in the face. I mean it. I could hear myself swallow. Hey, I got an idea, he said, his voice flat. Let's talk about something you actually know about, like that $5 bill. I sat on the edge of Lavender's old bed and looked around. It used to be a full room, kind of kid stuff left behind. When Star said he'd run the serial numbers on that dollar bill over the cafe's door, the 5 was the only other piece of money I could think of. I didn't tell you because I started to rag rug. I was ashamed. He closed his magazine. Of the Colonel? Of me, for not being sure. I'm sorry, I said. I hope you'll forgive me. I looked out the window. A bedsheet flapped on Miss Rose's wash line. He propped his chin on his hand and studied me, his blue eyes serious in his freckled face. Then, like sunlight after rain, okay, he said, I forgive you. Dale kills me, just like that. I never forgive. I like revenge too much. Yeah, he said, I'm Baptist. So far, fast or never is the only speeds I got with forgiving. But from here on, Mel, if we're partners, we're partners. If we're not, we're not. You decide and you decide it now. Partners. He jumped up. Good, let's give Queen a bath. Lavender's coming for support and I want her to smell good. Dale, I said, you're the best friend I got. I know, he grinned. Come on, Desperado. You wash and I'll dry. Dear upstream mother, it's night. Everybody is asleep. Still no word from the Colonel or Miss Lena. I feel like a sky without stars. Dale and I had a fight today, and then we made up and gave QE the second a bath. Lavender came for supper. He wore jeans and his chambray shirt with sleeves rolled up. Lavender and Sam drive by to Sycamore tomorrow, almost to the mountains, to race the Sycamore 200. He says his car runs great and looks like $1 million with their ads painted on it. Deputy Marla come too. In fact, she mashed the potatoes. Congratulations on achieving your dream, she told Lavender. That must feel great. Lavender spooned green onions onto his turnip greens. It does, but dreams are shapeshifters. Get close, and before you can lay a hand on them, they change. She smiled the way women smile at Lavender, but I can tell she secretly thinks he's crazy. The hurricanes turned towards Charleston. I hope Cousin Gideon will be okay. I got 3 bottles ready for launch, 2 blue ones and a clear one. Lavender's dropping my bottles on his way west. You might at least see one drift by. I hope you won't mind, but the message says, lost, Miss Lena, 36 years old, 5'6", red hair, 130 pounds, last seen wearing a black wig and red kimono. Contact Mo in Tupelo Landing, 252-555-4663. If you see Miss Lena, please help her. I'm pretty sure the Colonel can take care of himself. Mo. Chapter 23, Creative Chaos. By the next morning, Hurricane Amy had hit the warm Gulf Stream waters, swerved north. She's coming, Miss Rose said, clicking on the television. You got to get the house ready. I'm going to head into town for supplies, batteries, candles, and drinking water. Dale, find the transitor radio. Honey, make sure it's working. Then tie down the stable in the yard, too. Mo, could you give me a hand? I nodded, trying not to think of the Colonel and Miss Lena. It didn't work. She grabbed her keys and gave me a quick hug. Mo, you know why Star hasn't found Lana, don't you? Because Slate is a reptile, making it impossible to guess where he is or where he's going to strike. I guessed. Because he's greedy and he's smart, she said. Slate believes Lana's worth $500,000. Believe me, he'll keep her safe so he can cash in. We'll find her, Mo. You just gotta have some faith, all right? Yes, ma'am, I said, hoping she was right. I looked across the barnyard as she drove away. To the east, the clouds gathered like an invading army. Dale and I tied the front porch furniture down and headed for the stable. The wind had picked up. It rolled across the fields in waves, tearing the brittle tobacco leaves. As I watched the clouds boil towards us, I made a decision. If Slate calls again, I'm paying for ransom, I told Dale. With what? He asked, scurrying up the roof ladder to the stable loft. We ain't got $10 between us. Slate don't know that. You're nuts. Stand back, he called, dropping a bale of hay. I cut through boiling twine with his pocket knife and carried an armload of prickly, sweet-smelling hay to Cleo's stall. She'll be extra hungry, he said, looking at the sky. She always is in a hurricane. Same thing happens to me. He led Cleo to the stall and removed her bridle. You'll be okay, he told her, running his hand along her flank. You'll do just fine. She spent the rest of the morning putting up or staying down anything the wind could throw or steal. Liz stuck close clouds rolled in the dark Solon. She's clingy, Dale said, nudging her out of the way with his knee. She feels the storm. By lunchtime, the storm had claimed half the sky. The tops of limber young pines swayed in the wind as giant oaks and pecan trees groaned and creaked. Hey, deputy, Dale yelled as we slammed the back door and swarmed the kitchen. You want a cucumber sandwich? Silence. We found her stretched out on the settee, asleep with her mouth open, her hand curled over her pistol. How can she keep without a hurricane coming? I asked. Shh, Dale said. She got in late. She left us. Why? She's supposed to be waiting for Slate's call. He shrugged. Let's eat. We tiptoed back to the kitchen, halfway through our sandwiches, and the phone jangled. We both jumped. Slate, I cried, reaching for the phone. He knocked my hand away. No, we gotta trace the call. I'll get Deputy Marla. He sprinted across the room. As he cleared the doorway, I grabbed the phone. Slate, Molavo? You win, dirtbag. I know where your $500,000 is. I'll take you to it as you give me the Colonel and Miss Lana back. I get them, you get the money. Deal? The voice on the other end of the line came back scratchy and thin. Soldier? My heart exploded like a firework. Colonel, listen to me, he said. I've escaped. The call faded, then popped back in. Slate's after me. As soon I lose Slate, return, free Lana, the call faded. Colonel, my closet, shelf, packet to roses. Don't trust anyone. But Star says, don't trust Star. Don't trust. Why not? I heard a hollow click. Deputy Marla had cut into our line. Go, he said, his voice full of urgency. I don't have to, moron, I snapped, hoping he would play along. I already told you I don't want your stupid, all-expensive paid vacation. Neither does Deputy Marla. Ask yourself, jerk brain. She just came back on the line. It worked. The Colonel hung up. I stood in the kitchen, my heart turning handsprings. The Colonel was free, and soon Miss Lana would be too. I wanted to laugh out loud. He's free, he's free, he's free, my heart pumped. As Deputy Muller charged down the hall and smoothed the grin off my face. Think. Tell her the Colonel's free, and Star will call her first. And Star can't be trusted. I chewed my lip, trying to remember if she had sent the Colonel, if she might have recognized his voice. She answered the question for me. Telemarketer? She asked, stepping into the room. I nodded, trying to look miserable. I had to go home and find that packet and get it before the storm hit. Yeah, I said, false alarm. You can go back to sleep. I'm caught up with my rest, she said, stretching. Why weren't you here last night? I asked. Slate might have called. Joe said he needed my help with some reports, she said, reaching for the mayonnaise. It was calculated risk. Was it the telemarketer you're selling? A cruise, I grinned. Into a hurricane. Come on, Dale. We still got to tie things down at the tobacco shelter. Maybe we can let that stuff blow away, he muttered. Deputy Marla stifled a yawn. Stay here where I can see you, she called as the screen door slapped shut behind us. It took me 10 seconds flat to clue Dale in. We gotta go to my place. I'm swearing you to secrecy. I told him. Think me out of this and your life won't be worth goose spit. I don't think you should threaten a partner. Plus, geese don't spit, he said. He grabbed my arm, and your house is a crime scene. He cried as if he just thought of it. Which maybe he had. I couldn't get grounded for the rest of my life. Well, at least we'll be grounded together. Great, he mumbled. You in or you out? I demanded. I'm in, he said miserably, but you owe me, Mo LeBeau. We grabbed Dale's faded red bike and sprinted across the yard at the edge of the asphalt. He swung onto the saddle. Hurry, he said, hop on. I landed neatly on the handlebars. Within moments, we flew along the road, Dale standing and pumping the pedals, while I leaned back, holding my legs away from the spokes. We met just one truck on the way to town. That was Daddy, Dale pointed. I nodded, trying to ignore the heat of his breath against the back of my neck. He wasn't weaving, I said comfortingly. The scorn in Dale's voice could have curled my hair. Don't mean nothing, he said. He mostly drives straighter drunk than he does sober. 5 minutes later, we passed the Welcome to Tupelo Landing sign. The wind gusted, shaking dead limbs from the trees and perfuming the air with their scent. Steer clear of the Piggly Wiggly, I told Dale. We don't want nobody to see us. Instead of swerving left as I expected, Dale rocked back hard on the pedals. We skidded to a halt and the bicycle spit me forward. I landed on my feet running. If you want to decide where we're going, you pedal, he said, his face flushed. What have you been eating, lead? I've been eating your mama's cooking, I said, trotting him back. Hop on. I pedaled the rest of the way to the cafe. Shh, I told Dale, lifting the yellow cranston tape. It was spooky inside, dark and gloomy, particularly from the thickening clouds and partly because the furniture lay sprawled across the room. This way, I whispered, heading for the colonel's quarters. The door swung open. The closet's over here, I said, grabbing a chair and dragging it across the pine floor. Dale looked in jump boots, standing in attention at the colonel's footlocker. The colonel sure is neat, he said. The colonel says keeping your interior space neat lets you practice creative chaos in your exterior life. Without this sanctuary, he said you'd have to shoot Miss Lena and leave her for dead. Hold my chair, Dale. Creative chaos, Dale murmured. That explains a lot. I stepped up onto the chair and rummaged along the colonel's shelf, pushing aside a shoebox, an old checker set, and a fruitcake left over from Miss Lena's baking binge 3 Christmases back. I stretched my tiptoes. Aha, I said, pulling a packet from the back corner. I blew off the dust. Sorry, I said as Dale coughed. I rubbed my arm across the dark brown packet. The word scrawled across it on the front flap stopped my breath. What on earth? I handed the folder to Dale. Slate, he read. How come the colonel has something with Slate's name on it? I don't know. I hopped down and peeked inside. Newspaper clippings? I scanned the headlines. Slate found guilty. Slate gets life. Underneath lay a legal pad of notes, all of them the colonel's scrawl. My mouth went dry. Why would the colonel have notes on Slate? I stuffed the folder under my shirt and tucked my shirt trail in, the packet making me swell-chested like an umpire. We'll check this stuff at your house, I told them, wiggling the packet into place. Let's go. As we sprinted across the living room, something clunked on the front porch. Someone swore softly. Hide! We bolted to Miss Lana's suite and slid under her bike, sliding into home. I held my breath as dusty boots clomped past us and Miss Lana's closet door scraped open. Wiggs? This must be the lunatic's room, a man murmured. He backtracked and headed for the colonel's quarters. I closed my eyes as he tore through the colonel's closet, cursed, and finally headed for the door. Had to be Slate, Dale whispered, squirming forward. Wait, I said, grabbing his arm. Was that a second voice? A woman's voice? I lay still, trying to pan human sound from the wind. Let's go, I said. We crept into the living room. I felt the shadow in the doorway more than I saw it. It wheeled to find Deputy Marla standing behind us, pistol drawn. Well, well, what have we here? She asked. Don't shoot, Dale yelped, raising his hands. The pistol didn't budge. Deputy Marla, I said, crossing my arms over my chest and the colonel's packet. What are you doing here? I have a better question. What are you doing here? Don't say nothing, Dale, I warned. He stood quiet and still. Dale hates guns. We ain't a danger to you, I told her. Ain't no reason to pull a gun. She blinked slowly. No, she said, lowering the weapon. Of course not. I just didn't know who I'd find. She said, her eyes moving to the colonel's quarters. It's just us, Dale said, breathless. Rising 6th graders, I added, starting at the pistol. Unarmed kids. She holstered the gun. Well, what are you two doing at my crime scene? Surely she'd seen Slate, hadn't she? I faked a smile. We're looking for clues, like detectives worth their salt. If we found anything, which we didn't, we thought we'd turn it over to you. We could get a promotion out of it. We hope so. She stepped forward, her eyes hard. Dale and I backed up into the colonel's quarters. Star might have missed something, I continued. Her eyes flickered to the colonel's bunks and boots. Plus, I miss my family, I continued. I'm homesick. I told you to stay where I could see you, she replied. Who did she think she was, using that teacher voice on us? She kept herself between me and the door and hand on the pistol. I looked up into her eyes. It was like looking into the eyes of a snake. The colonel had warned me not to trust Star, but maybe it wasn't Star I needed to worry about. Maybe it was Deputy Marla. I know it might look like we disobeyed you, but the black and white thinking, I said. Miss Lena says nothing's really black and white except zebras and old movies. Even dreams aren't black and white unless you're a dog. It was a cheap trick, but like most tricks, it worked. I needed to think, and Dale was never in 11 years I've known him passed up a chance to talk about a dog. He didn't disappoint. Queen Elizabeth II dreams quite a bit, Deputy Marla, he said, relaxing. You ever watch a dog dream? I don't have a dog, she said, keeping her eyes on me. Sometimes Queen Elizabeth prances in her sleep, he said, her paw flits. Or she grins and tosses her head like she's in a field of butterflies. One time I think she thought she was dream a rabbit. I know she caught something because she shook her head back and forth, but it could have been a squirrel. I'd rather not think it was a rat, he said, lowering his voice. Still, he said, turning to me, I don't know where you get off saying Liz dreams in black and white. I mean, she didn't actually tell you that, I'm pretty sure. He hesitated. Did she? No, I said. I think Miss Lana told me. Maybe. She listens to NPR, unless I'm mistaken. NPR is saying black and white for dog dreams. Deputy Marla interrupted. Well, Miss Lana's wrong. You think dogs dream in color? Dale asked, his face brightening. Me too. I mean, Miss Lana's idea of black and white thinking is psychological poppycock, she snapped. There are absolutes in life, and the sooner you learn that, the better. Take you, for instance, she said, glaring at me. I've caught you on the wrong side of the law. That means you absolutely have a problem. On the wrong side of what law? I asked. All I did was come home. All you did was lie to an officer, escape proactive custody, and disturb a crime scene, she said. That, plus dragging Dale into trouble. Dale just came along to keep me company, I said. He's polite that way. He peddled you over here, she said. That makes him accomplice. Her glance raked Dale. Your daddy told me he saw you on the highway. He's lucky I didn't arrest him for drunk driving. Dale shifted. Daddy's home, he said. Where's Mama? He looked at me, his eyes scared. I gotta go back home. What's wrong? She sneered. You afraid of a storm? No, I thought. I'm afraid of you. I took a step toward the door. Well, this has been real nice, but we got a couple more errands to do. I don't think so, she said, grabbing my arm. Her fingers pinched mean and rusty bicycle chain. She gave me a sharp shake. You ain't supposed to shake a kid, I told her, clamping my elbow to the side and kept the colonel's pocket from sliding loose. You can cause brain damage. She put her face close to mine. Who called you at the house? She demanded. What are you doing over here? Nobody called me. We ain't doing nothing, I said, and she shook me again, snapping my head back. Hey, Dale shouted, moving toward her. Leave her alone. Anger raced across her face like a fire across a wheat field. I'm tired of your redneck mouth, she said, pushing Dale with her free hand. Calm down, Dale, I said. She won't hurt me. She ain't stupid enough to get herself a child abuse charge. Doubt flickered across her face, and her grip loosened barely. Why so angry? Not because a couple of kids give her a slip. I wiggled my arm to test her grasp. How did you know where to find us? I told you, Dale's father. Bull, I said. We didn't tell him we were going. That's right, Dale said, and I kept the bike on the pavement, so you didn't track us either. Her eyes narrowed. What I know is none of your business. Deputy Marla didn't follow us here. She couldn't have. She came on her own. Either she overheard the carnal conversation or Slate tipped her off. She was mad because we got here first. She shook me again, and the colonel's packet slid out from under my shirt. What the heck? She muttered, reaching for it. Dale, I shouted. Set down. Hut, hut, hut. He sprinted towards the door. I dropped back 3 paces as Dale did a neat button hook. The colonel's packet sailed up at Deputy Marla's hands towards Dale's outstretched arms. She swirled toward him, and when she did, I picked up the colonel's steel-toed boot and swung it with all my might. She threw an arm over her face and ducked as she twisted the box floors. Her feet flew up and her head cracked against the corner of the bunk. She crashed to the floor like a sack of rotten onions. Shoot, Dale gasped, skidding to a stop. You killed her. I did not, I said, hoping it was true. She moaned. See, she ain't dead. Help me tie her up. No, he said, backing away. You can't hit deputies and tie them up. Even my people know that. I didn't hit her. I missed, I said. She fell down. Help me, Dale. Miss Lena needs us. I rushed to the closet and plucked out both of the colonel's neckties. Here, I said, tossing one with flamingos to Dale. The colonel wears this, he said, holding it to his arm's length. I grabbed the light-up clip-on featuring Charleston Rainbow Row and tied it over Deputy Marla's mouth. Miss Lena, Christmas before last, I told him. Hurry. We lashed her hands behind her with flamingos and knotted her shoestrings together. Finally, I snagged the packet and the colonel's bag. By the time I scammed down the steps, Dale had already rounded the side of the building. Dale, I shouted, you forgot your bike. He didn't look back. A gusty wind rattled the maples and shook the pines as I dropped the packet by Deputy Marla's car. It's harder to flatten a tire than I expected, but the time I got to the car's fourth tire, I had my technique down. Place the point at the bayonet, so, and slam the handle with the landscaping stone. As the car sank to its rims, Joe Starr's voice crackled through the radio. Marla, come in. I stared at it. If no one answered, he'd come to Miss Rose's for sure. I grabbed the radio. Hey, Joe, I said, making my voice low. Marla, is everything okay there? Why aren't you by the phone? I tried to deepen my voice. I'm securing the vehicle. In a way, it was true. Starr's silence crackled. I'm riding out the storm at Priscilla's. You stay put and keep those kids safe over and out. I hope she does stay put, I thought. I looked for the colonel's packet. No, I breathed. The wind had pried it and opened articles scattered towards the creek. I pounced, cramming all that I could reach inside my pocket, and looked at the sky. Hey, Dale, I shouted, running for the bikes. Wait for me. Chapter 24, Right Under Our Noses. Dale pumped like he could outpedal the storm. Me balanced on his handlebars, the storm's flat, angry hand shoving along the blacktop. Dale stood up on the pedals, painting as the front wheel began to squeak. There was something about that sound, the sound of metal, the whirling squeak. Stop, I shouted. I know where Miss Lena is. He slammed on the brakes, catapulting me off my perch. Where? He panted. Right under our noses. Dale looked down, then across the pitching ocean of corn and its green leaves going silver beneath the rolling sky. I don't see her, he said. Get back on. The old Blacklock place, I said, pointing to a sandy patching and its way through the corn. It's the perfect hiding place. Ain't nobody been there since Miss Blacklock died last winter. Nobody except us hunting dandelions and maybe Redneck Red to check on the still if everybody pretends he ain't running. Miss Lena's down that path. I know it. Star's already searched the empty houses. Get on. Deputy Marla's already searched, I said. He braced against the wind. Daddy might be home, Mo. I gotta go. Just a few minutes, I begged, stepping in front of the bike. Remember how Miss Bladlock's old water tower squeaks when the wind blows? I said. That's the sound I heard when Slate called. The wind raked in his hair. I got a foul-proof plan. Take us 5 minutes is all. 5 minutes to save Miss Lana's life. He bit his lip. I don't know. I hear Blacklock's place is haunted and everything's just like that she left it. And Lavender says Miss Blacklock's TV comes on at odd times and she changes the channels herself. I snorted. Don't be a baby. 5 minutes and you'll be a hero. He sighed. 5 minutes, Mo, that's all. 10 minutes later, we ditched the bike and hid behind the hydrangea. Stay low, I whispered, glancing at the wooden water tower in the side yard. Slate's been here, sure as my name Mo LeBeau, I added, nodding toward the tire racks in the driveway. Anybody could have left those tracks, he said. What's your foul-proof plan? I'm getting to that, I said, trying hard to think of my one. First, I do my surveillance, then I'll explain my strategy, which is genius quality, believe me. His shoulders slumped. You don't have a plan, do you? I knew it, he said, his eyes filling with tears. I knew not to come to this ghost farm with you during a hurricane. Shh, I'm casing the place, I said, my gazing taking the neat white house lingering on the padlocked front door. It's locked tight, just like people say. What was that? Dale whispered. Did you hear that TV? No, I didn't hear a TV, I said. Still an uneasy feeling settled cool hands against my neck. I swallowed hard and turned my attention to the side yard and the old water tower, with its banded legs, potbelly. Its windmill had lost an arm, but it swirled to battle each gust of the approaching storm. Faintly I heard it. Squeak, squeak. It was the water tower I had heard, no doubt about it, I said. There's only one way you could hear it from inside, Miss Blacklock's house. Slate wasn't inside when he called. Thank you, Jesus, Dale whispered. He must have been closer to the tower. I glanced out to the pump house. Its thick curtain of kudzu was torn. Someone had opened that door. She jumped in that pump house, I said, my heart pounding. Come on, we're search and rescue. If you see Slate, give me a signal. I do a nice owl, he suggested. Fine, I told him. If you see Slate, hoot like an owl. Now fan out. Dale shook his head. There's only 2 of us, he said. You gotta have 3 to fan, and that's the very least. Okay, I said, forget fanning. We'll surround the pump house. You go around back and I'll take the door. No, he said firmly. It's too snaky in the back. I'll go to the door. Snakes are mean enough in good weather. There's no telling how they do with a hurricane coming. I took a deep breath. The colonel says sometimes all a leader can do is see which way everybody is going and try to get in front. This looked like one of those house times. Okay, I said. We'll both take the door. Follow me. I crouched low and sprinted across the yard to the pump houses, Dale on my heels. Miss Lena, I whispered, are you in there? Squeak. I grabbed the door rusty latch. Miss Lena! I shafted a light pierce to the shed's gloomy heart. Inside, I could just make out a case of old mason jars, a rusted rake, and a wooden bucket rotted half through. She ain't here, I said, my heart tumbling. No, Dale said, kicking an old bottle. I'm sorry, Mo. Let's go home. Behind us, a tree thunked against the side of the house. What the? He glanced back at the house and screamed, the sound slicing me like razors as he drove to my feet. What? I shouted, falling to the ground beside him. Did you see Slate? I thought you were going to hoot like an owl. It's Miss Blacklock's ghost, he cried, his face ashen. Where? In the house, he said, his eyes glassy with fear. She's flitting past the window. Thunk. I squinted past the dancing broom straw. That ain't no ghost, I told him. Somebody's in there. I sprinted across the yard to the back porch. Miss Blacklock's heavy back door scraped across the kitchen faded linoleum. The rumors were right. The kitchen stood just as Miss Blacklock left it the morning she died. Table set for one, a paper-dried dandyful in a mason jar, a cast-iron fryer pan on the stove. Miss Lena, I whispered. The wind groaned and the roof rattled. Let's try the living room, I murmured, looking away from the table. It looked too lonely, too abandoned, too close to being alive. Dale grabbed my arm. What's that smell? He asked, sniffing the air. I scanned the kitchen. Pizza boxes littered the counter. Pizza Hut delivers out here? He gasped. He tiptoed to the boxes, opened the top one, and sniffed again. Empty, but fresh. At least Miss Lena ain't hungry. I crept to the living room. The room sat prim and proper, a torn curtain fluttered by a cracked window pane. There's your ghost, I said. Then my eyes adjusted. I saw something else. Blood. Blood on the floor. Blood on the shattered lamp. Blood on the faded wallpaper. Miss Lena, I screamed. Where are you? We tore through the creaking house, yanking open doors, calling her name. She ain't here, Dale panted, his face pale as forgotten ghost. Follow the blood, I said, heading back to the living room's wallpaper, placing my hand against her handprint. There, I said, pointed. We followed a faint smear of blood across the room, down the hall to a door. As I pushed the door open, the wind grabbed it, jerking me onto the porch. Scuff marks scared the dirt drive and disappeared in crisscross of tire tracks. She was fighting, Dale said, his voice shaking. Fighting's good. The pecan trays flayed in the darkening sky, and an old fertilizer bag cartwheeled across the yard. The storm's first raindrops spattered into dust and the size of dimes. He's moved her. We gotta get some help, I said. Come on, Mama's closet, he said, running toward his bike. She'll know what to do. Chapter 25, A Hurricane Party. Mama, Dale panted minutes later as we blasted through her door. Help us. Miss Rose stood, phone to ear, in the living room. Where on earth have you two been? She cried, lowering the phone. Where's Deputy Marla? Miss Lena's hurt, I gasped. Lena, where is she? Blood, I said, my voice sounding far away. At Miss Blacklock's place. Who's on the phone? Is it Lavender? Dale asked, reaching out. Let me talk. Lavender? I hugged the packet beneath my shirt and sobbed. Miss Rose lifted the phone. Lavender, they're back and... Hello? Hello? She dropped it. The line's gone dead. She pushed me gently onto the settee. Tell me what happened. Dale sat beside me as she pulled the chair close. Take a deep breath and start from the beginning. I went through the story step by step. She listened, her green eyes searching our faces as the words tumbled out. Where's Slate now? I don't know, I said. The colonel said he's led the way from Miss Lena and saved her. The next thing I knew, Slate was in our house. That's all I know. She sat back and stared out the window. The wind charged across the tobacco field behind the ragged band of rain and slammed the house, rocking it. In the distance, I heard a crash, a tree hitting the ground. The lights flickered. A lawn chair tumbled across the yard to the barbed wire fence. If the colonel said he'd rescue Lena, he'd probably done exactly that, she said. But you didn't see the blood on the floor, on the wall? You have to save her. She put her hand on mine. We don't know whose blood that was. I do know. I saw Miss Lena's handprint. If that was a handprint, we do know she had blood on her hand, and that's all we know. We don't know whose it was or how it got there. If we're going to assume, let's assume in positive direction. My money's on the colonel, she said. She headed down the hallway and returned a moment later with her shotgun. But in case Slate wants to come call in, let's ready a welcome. What about Joe Starr? Dale asked. Her eyes went hard as emeralds. Marla had me fooled, she said. Joe Starr could have fooled me too. We'll assume they're working together until we know different and hope he doesn't drop by. He won't. He's staying at Miss Retzel's, I said. He radioed in while I was flattening Deputy Marla's tires. You flattened her tires? She flipped into mother mode just like that, like a werewolf growling hair beneath a full moon. Maybe, I said, sliding the colonel's packet onto the coffee table. Let me try to remember. I studied her a moment, just out of curiosity. How would you feel about flattened tires if it was true? She narrowed her eyes. Let's see. Marla sat at my table and plotted against us, helped kidnap my friends, and held a gun on you and Dale. If you flattened her tires, Mo, I believe I could take it in stride. She's on the rims all the way around, I said, and she smiled, unleashing dimples. So, I said, what's our plan? Our plan is to stay safe and wait out the storm. She held up her hand like a traffic cop, stopping my words. It's too late to go out there, she said. It's too dangerous. We'll stay here until the storm passes, and then we'll find the colonel. Would you put the candles around, please, ma'am? She said, handing me a box of matches as the lights flickered again. Dale, I need a hand in the kitchen. I hated it, but I knew she was right. I slipped the candles out just in time. The lights died, and Miss Rose and Dale spread armloads of treats across the coffee table. Oreos, cheese puffs, chips, pretzels. Dale grinned. We normally eat boring during a hurricane, but Mama's making you feel at home. She's a natural-born hostess. Thank you, Miss Rose. Miss Lena's hurricane parties from famous countywide as well as in Charleston. On hurricane days when most women fill their grocery carts with bread and milk, Miss Lena loads ours with candy, cakes, and tapered candles. If I die in the storm, I'll drift away in the arms of sugar coma and candlelight, she always says. Miss Rose pulled the card table to the closet. My pleasure, Mo. Dale, get the card, she said. I need a party. For the next few hours, Hurricane Amy battered the house and screamed through the window screens. Razor-colored rain slashed driveways, shredding leaves, toppling trees. Anybody that says he ain't scared in a hurricane is a liar or a fool. That is what the colonel says. A hurricane spins up like you're nothing, taking your world apart like it's nothing too. There's no time in it, no sense of the sun moving, no waxing or waning light. All you can do is breathe and ignore the world flying to pieces beyond your door. Keep calm. We played cards, ate junk, and laughed too loud. After a parade of losing hands, I found myself staring at four fat aces. Dale bit his lip, a sure sign he's bluffing. All or nothing, he said, pushing his pitful 3 chips into the pot. Fine, I said, nudging the double handful of chips to the center of the table. Miss Rose started from behind her mountain of chips. I think you're both bluffing, she said. All or nothing, what you got? Dale flipped his cards over. A pair of fours, he said, looking pleased. I snorted. 4 aces. As I reached for the pot, the door slammed open and the storm screamed into the room, snuffling out candles, knocking over lamps. Queen Elizabeth jumped on barking and Miss Rose leaped on her feet. Dale, the door! Dale rushed the door and the wind pinning his shirt against his lean chest. A man stepped inside gloom, his face hidden by hood. Dale, I cried, it's Slate. Miss Rose lunged forward, yanking Dale behind her. Get out, she shouted, throwing her weight against the man's chest. He staggered back, rocked forward, and grabbed her shoulders. Shut up, he growled and shoved her across the room. As he stepped inside, his hood fell from his face. Daddy, Dale said, backing away. What are you doing here? Chapter 26. Sorry. What do you think I'm doing here, you little nothing? Mr. McComb slurred, pulling the front door to. You think I'm standing outside in this weather when I got a loving family to come home to? He swayed like the pines outside, dripping water from his jacket. Dale, I said, making my voice soft, back up. Out to the corner of my eye, I saw Miss Rose rise unsteadily to her feet. Dale took a ragged breath and stepped back. Miss Rose pulled him behind her. McCone, she said, you're drunk and you're not supposed to be here. He looked at her the way a cat looks at a bird, his eyes glistening. So, he said, why don't you call the detective boyfriend of yours and complain? You think I don't know about him? He leered at her. Go ahead and call. So that was it. Detective Starr ain't Miss Rose's boyfriend, Mr. McCone. He's got the hots for Miss Rutzel. Of course, I added. You don't need to take my word for it. He'll be back in a few minutes and you can ask him yourself. Shut up, Mo, he growled, keeping his eyes on Miss Rose. You talk too much. If you were my kid, I'd knock some sense into you, wouldn't I, Dale? Go ahead, Rose, call for help. When she didn't move, he sneered. What's the matter? Phone out? She glanced at us. Dale, Mo, light the candles. In the dark here. It's dark in here. I reached for the matches. I'd seen Mr. McCone drunk plenty of times, but I've never seen him like this. Not this mean, not this bold. Outside, a tree crashed to the ground, but the storm was no longer mattered. McCone, Miss Rose said, if you insist on staying, we can at least sit down and act like, hey, boy, your mama told me she took papers out on me, he demanded, his face twisted. Threw me out of my own house? She tell you that? Dale's hand shook as he lit the candle. She told me you don't live here anymore. Well, he said, today's your lucky day. I just moved back in. You, he said to Miss Rose, get me something to eat. She hesitated. I knew she wouldn't leave us alone with him. Did you hear me? The colonel always feeds Mr. McCone when he comes to the cafe drunk. He says it sobers him up. I'll get you something, Mr. McCone, I said. How about a PB&J on Wonder Bread? Am I talking to you? He shouted, slamming his fist against Miss Rose's bookcase, setting her red face rocking. Did I ask you to get me something? Sit down and shut up. Don't. You'll find yourself tied up like that loudmouth stepmother of yours. My anger jumped like a flame to a wick. What do you know about Miss Lena? McCone, Miss Rose said. If you've hurt Lena, I swear all. His hand snaked out. He grabbed the front of the blouse and yanked her forward onto her toes. You'll what? He growled. Get me thrown out of my own house? Daddy, Dale cried, let her go. Time shifted into slow motion. Mr. McCone's hand swooped down in a clean, vigorous, slamming Miss Rose's face, snapping her head back. She staggered sideways, her knees buckling as she crashed to the floor. Dale, I shouted, karate, fighting stance. I leaped in front of Miss Rose, hands up. Mr. McCone laughed and swiped at me like a big cat. I danced back, ready to kick. Dale, Mr. McCone smirked. Dale won't help you. He's a coward. That did it. I kicked with all my might, leaning, twisting my body, and throwing my weight onto it, sending a perfect round kick to the side of the knee. I felt his knee give, and I saw his face twist in pain. He lurched sideways at Miss Rose, struggled to her feet. I darted forward to elbow his chin, but she grabbed my arm. Stop, she gasped. He'll kill you. McCone, please. She's a child. Just sit down. I'm sorry, I'll get you something to eat. His laugh came jagged as broken glass and stepped closer, fist raised. The first shot rang out and the base was on Miss Rose's bookcase exploded. I turned. Dale stood by the settee, face pale, Miss Rose's shotgun pointed square at his father's heart. His eyes met Mr. McCone's. Get out of this house or I swear I will kill you, he said. Mr. McCone's laugh wobbled thin and uncertain through the stunned silence. You won't shoot me. He stepped forward and Dale backed up, biting his lip. He was right. Dale was bluffing. He could never pull that trigger. He will too shoot you, I said. I'll swear it was self-defense. Hush, Mo, Miss Rose said, her voice scared. Dale. Mr. McCone edged nearer. Dale eased back, stopping in the hallway door. One more step and Mr. McCone could have had the gun. Then what? I looked for a weapon. Nothing. I glanced at Dale's terrified face. Pull the trigger, I said. Mr. McCone snorted. You ain't got it in you, boy. Maybe not, the colonel said, stepping out of the dark hallway into the door, but you'd better believe I have it in me. He reached across Dale's body and took the gun. Good work, son, he said. I'll take it from here. The colonel pointed the shotgun at Mr. McCone. Get on your knees and put your hands behind your head, you yellow-bellied traitor, the colonel said. Soldier? Yes, sir, I said, my voice full of tears. Find me something to tie this coward up with. He glanced around the room. Where's Lena? Isn't she with you? Fear flashed across his face like lightning. Not yet, he said, but she will be. He glared at Mr. McCone. I said, get on your knees. Soldier, are you okay? I blinked back tears. Yes, sir. You missed seeing me in battle, I added, squirming my shoulders. Hand-to-hand combat with an assailant twice my size. A smile whispered across his unshaven face. I look forward to your report, he said. Right now, we have a prisoner to deal with. Mr. McCone barked out a laugh. Prisoner? What are you talking about? Point that gun down. He licked his rough lips. Rose, I'm sorry if I hurt you, he said, glancing at her. You just make me so mad I can't help it. Dale, could you get your mother some ice? The colonel asked. And secure the back door, please, sir. I'm afraid I jimmied the lock on my way in. His gun hadn't wavered. McCone, on your knees. Mr. McCone bumped to the floor, hands high. Cripes, he muttered. Your kid kicks like a mule. He gave Miss Rose a sticky smile. I said I'm sorry. I agree, the colonel said, taking the extension cord I yanked from the wall. Sorry is precisely the right word for you. Sit back and tie your feet together. Soldiers, see if you can find another cord. As the colonel bulldogged Mr. McCone's hands, Dale came back cupping a dish towel of ice. McCone, the colonel said, where's Lena? How should I know? Then where's Slate? Where's your partner? Miss Rose gasped. His partner? We ain't partners, Mr. McCone said. Slate hired me to drive some pizzas to the ballot place, that's all. He twisted like a snake on a stick. I didn't know you and Lena were in trouble, Colonel. I swear I didn't. He's lying, I said. The colonel nodded. Mr. McCone dropped his helpless expression, replacing it with his usual hard mask. Fine, he snarled. Turn me in. Delivering pizzas ain't a crime. The colonel sat in Miss Rose's straight back chair and leaned close to him. If anything happens to Lana, that's first-degree murder. First Slate and you. McCone, Miss Rose said, for God's sake, if you know anything, try Jesse Tatum's place, he said, his voice sullen. Slate said something about going back there. He probably took Lana with him. Of course, I said, watching Dale ice Miss Rose's eyes. He moved easy and unsure, like he'd iced it 1,000 times. A criminal always returns to the scene of the crime. I should have thought of that. Shut up, Mo, Mr. McCone snapped. You got too much mouth. No wonder your mother threw you away. Dale froze, and I saw the colonel's hand tighten on his gun. Finally, someone had said it out loud, and out loud the words felt surprisingly thin. I looked at Mr. McCone in the eye. Maybe she did throw me away, and maybe she didn't, I said. But if she did, she only did it once. You throw your people away every day that rolls around, and I'm sure that ain't because something's wrong with them. I looked at the colonel. What's your plan, sir? He sat still, as quiet as a rabbit, his long, fine-boned hands draped delicately across the shotgun. We're going to ask to borrow Rose Pinto, he said finally. If she says yes, I'll wait for the storm to break. Then I'm going to find Lana. Not by yourself, you're not, I thought, but I nodded and bided my time. Chapter 27, Storm Break. The colonel placed a pistol by the front door next to Mr. McCone's chainsaw. My pistol won't help you, Mr. McCone sneered. Ain't got no bullets. Slate doesn't know that, the colonel replied, checking the gas in the saw. Dale settled on the sofa with a new bag of chips. Deputy Marla conned us on top, he said, being his father. Looks like she was working with Slate all along. Maybe we should change our name to Dimwit Detectives, he added, dropping a chip into Liz's mouth. She conned me, I said. You figured her out. But why would Deputy Marla team up with a loser like Slate? Only two possibilities, he said, money or love, or in her case, probably both. The colonel said, setting his pack by the door. Soldiers were able to find the packet in my closet. I pointed toward the coffee table. I'm sorry, sir, but a few clippings got away, I said. It's hard to flatten tires and do paperwork at the same time. Truer words were never spoken, my dear, he said. He picked up the packet and disappeared into the kitchen. I found him at the kitchen table a short time later. His candle flickered low, and he rested his forehead in his hands. He looked up, candlelit playing across the lines of his face. Soldier, he said, straightening the clippings. I slipped into the chair beside him and waited. I will be honest with you, my dear. When Lena told me about these papers, I hoped she was just being dramatic, but after looking at them, I realized I was somehow involved in Slate's robbery, he said, his voice thick with grief. I can't imagine I'd ever had these notes if I weren't. Apparently, Slate had the least one accomplice. I hope I'm not that man, but we have to prepare ourselves. I could be. I nodded. You could run, sir, I told him. His smile flashed even with the white in the candlelight. Running isn't in my nature anymore, then it's in yours. I'll accept responsibility for my past, whatever it is, he said, sliding the clippings into the packet. I can't change the past, soldier. We can only be grateful for the life of a new day and move on. Yes, sir, I said, leaning against him. I'm proud of you, Colonel. He smiled, and I'm proud of you. You've kept your head and your heart throughout all of this, and you've shown uncommon courage. We'll just need a little more courage to get through. As the storm wore on, Dale and Liz napped. Mr. McCone sulked, and Miss Rose prayed. The colonel paced like a leopard. I picked up volume 6 and a pen. Dear upstream mother, I wrote. I crossed out the words. Dear Miss Lena, hold on, we'll find you. Mo. As the hurricane whirred, the colonel patrolled. Once he stopped by a window. He winced and leaned forward, and his forehead gently bumping the glass. Colonel, I said, rushing to him, are you okay? He put his weary arm around me. I am, but this feels so familiar. The storm, the danger. Rain lashed the window as he looked across the room to Miss Rose, who'd settled on the settee with her eyes closed. She's praying, I whispered. He waited until she opened her eyes. Rose, he said, I think the storm's breaking. Of course, she said, taking the Pinto's keys from her pocket. I'll take the back road to Jesse's rather than going through town. I've seen less of downed trees in the forest than out in the open, where when the trees were exposed. I'll have to cross just one small clear field where the winds will be strongest. I'll come in by the crash pine and drive the lane along the river. He looked at Mr. McComb. If McComb gives you any trouble, feel free to shoot him, he added, a smile in his eyes. Thank you, Colonel, she said. That's very generous of you. I'm going with you, sir, I said. Thank you, soldier, but no. You stay with Rose. That's an order. I shook my head. I lost my first mother in a hurricane, and I ain't losing Miss Lena in this one. I'm going, Colonel. Dale sat up on the settee. There's no point arguing when she gets like this, he said. He sighed and scanned the cords blinding Mr. McCone's hands and feet. You're safe, Mama, he said, his voice soft. And Mo and me are partners. I'm going too. I won't say it's my finest hour, but stacking up pretty good. I stood at attention more or less until the colonel nodded. Rose, he said, his eyes questioning. She hesitated. Colonel, you have to promise. With my life, he said, you're taking those kids with you? You're all crazy. Mr. McCone snarled at Dale, trotted to his room for rain slickers. That boy's a coward. He ain't gonna be nothing but in the way. The colonel shook his head. A coward? Dale's already twice the man you'll ever be, he said, slipping the pistol in his back. Here, Mo, Dale said, tossing me a rain jacket. The colonel grabbed his pack and chainsaw, opened the door, and pushed his way onto the porch. As we watched from the window, he staggered down the steps, the hurricane shoving him like a schoolyard bully. He pried open the Pinto's front door, swung the chainsaw in, and then folded himself into the car like a controlist. Miss Rose fussed with our rain jackets until the Pinto's headlights flared. I'll hold the door, she said. You hold on to each other and go to the passenger side. The colonel will help you. She tried to kiss Dale, but he ducked. Ah, Mama, he said, shrugging away. Don't you Mama me, she said. She opened the door and held on as we scampered onto the wall of wind. It clutched at us, slid us across the porch like skaters. Hold on, she shouted. Dale grabbed my arm and we shoved our way to town, and whined, stepping, dripping, grabbing. Well done, the colonel said as the wind slammed the door behind us. Dale dove into the back seat and we took off at snail's pace. The colonel hunched over the wheel as he crept down the drive and onto the road. Hurricane Amy pounded our little car with both fists. It's like riding in a drum, I shouted, wiping a fog off windshield. Help me watch for fallen trees, he bellowed. Dale and I leaned forward. We were lucky to see 10 feet ahead. Twice we stopped to chainsaw trees out of our path. Are you okay, sir? I asked as we drove around the second tree. He nodded but clenched his jaw and fingers went white. He gripped the wheel so hard. When we reached a small open field near the crash pine, he stopped. Double check seat belts, he said, and edged out of the woods. The wind grabbed our little car's nose and turned us. Hang on, he shouted, and the wind pushed up sideways down the road, skidding, skidding, skidding. Our fender grazed the crashed pine, and the colonel gasped. Slowly, we slid toward the bridge. Unfasten seatbelts, he yelled. Prepare for emergency exit. I fumbled with my belt as he floored the gas. I couldn't hear our engine through the storm's howl, but I felt our wheels spin and finally scratch on the wet gravel. We fishtailed past the bridge, the beams of our headlights dancing jagged through the trees, and we bounced onto a lane leading to Mr. Jesse's. The trees blocked the wind, and I could hear Dale singing himself calm in the back seat. We inched on to Mr. Jesse's drive. We'll leave the car here, the colonel said. He held his door and we struggled out with him. No flashlights, he said. Stay behind me. No noise. Be careful. We bent low, crawling over fallen trees and slipping through the wet grass to Mr. Jesse's porch. The colonel rolled onto the porch, silent as fog, as we followed. There's Slate, I whispered, peeping over the windowsill. Where's Miss Lena? You two stay here, the colonel told us. I'll find her. He disappeared into the rain. Slate had balanced his flashlight on Mr. Jesse's lazy boy, dropping it in place with two pillows. His pistol lay by the flashlight, blunt-nosed and mean. Dale and I watched, barely breathing, as Slate peeled back to Mr. Jesse's rug and picked up the pry bar. His bald head glistened and sweat ran crooked down the side of his face. He worried he would pry the bar onto the roof board and step out on the high end of the bar. The board broke loose with Dusty scream. What's he after? Dale asked. $500,000, I whispered. As I watched Slate work, I minded my race. What I did know about this house. Old wood sitting 2 feet off the ground and bricks pillars. Or was it? Is Mr. Jesse's house underpinned? I whispered. Yeah, Dale said as Slate pried through the third board free. Solid brick. Why? Slate pried board after board free. When he got to the gap large enough, he grabbed his flashlight and leaned into the space, peering into darkness beneath the house. Attack, I whispered, but the colonel said, Field command, attack. We snuck through the door and across the room. Slate knelt before us, grunting like a pig as he shone the light beneath the floorboards. I pointed to Mr. Jesse's massive oak coffee table. Dale crept toward it. Go, I shouted, placing a perfectly flying front kick on Slate's backside. Slate bellowed as he dove headfirst beneath the house. The table. We dragged it over the hole, jumped on, and held on for dear life. The table with its stubby legs left just enough space for us to see the glow of Slate's light. Now what? Dale gasped as the table buckled. We wait for the colonel, I said. You hear that, Slate? We got reinforcements coming. Slate kicked, roared, and kicked again. Let me out of here, he demanded, panting. I could hear him struggle with his back under the house. His flashlight beam darted around the table edges and exposed the new prison. His voice was cold and sly. How about I give you kids $100 apiece to go away? Maybe make it 200. You can buy anything you want. Hey Mo, could you hire a real detective to find out who your mother is? How about that? Dale leaned toward me. How does he know? Deputy Marla, I reminded him. Don't care about your true folks. No skin off my back. Dale, what are you going to do with your money? I'll throw in a couple tickets to Daytona. You'd like that, wouldn't you? Forget it, Slate, he said. What do you think? I'm stupid? I think you're your father's son, he said, his light darting frantically around his prison. Let me out of here, Slate roared, pushing up the road table. The table rose into the air and tilted, plopping us onto the floor. You think you're taking me down? He shouted, his hand crossing around my ankle, dragging me toward him. Let her go, Slate, the colonel shouted, jerking me out of the way. He shoved Mr. McCone's empty pistol into Slate's face. Tell me where Lena is now. How should I know? He snarled. I don't know where she is, and I don't care. The overhead lights flickered. Wow, Dale said, blinking like an old owl. Even dead guys get their lights turned back on before we do. I peered at the bloody bandage on Slate's hand and the cut on his head. Looks like you had an accident, I said. That lunatic mother of yours hit me with a lamp, he sputtered. She nearly killed me. I grinned. I guess that explains all the blood at the place. Too bad he didn't bleed to death. Dale nodded. You might want to ask the prison doctor for some stitches for that head, Mr. Slate. That's one good thing about the hard time. Free medical. Slate, put your hands behind your head, the colonel commanded. Mo, got it, Colonel, I said, yanking the extension cord out of the wall. He tied Slate's hands and handed me an empty pistol. Keep this pointed at him. Do you think it's safe, sir? I asked. I've been going through the awkward stage. I hope my finger doesn't slip. I said. The colonel dragged Slate into the room. Dale, the colonel said, tie his feet, son. Yes, sir. I have Boy Scout skills. Dale kills me. He went to Boy Scouts twice before Mr. McCone refused to buy him a uniform and he had to drop out. Dale has Boy Scout skills like I got a Harley. Now that colonel says taking the gun, I'll ask again, where's Lena? She got away from me and ran, Slate said, ducking away from the pistol. I don't know where she is. I do, a voice at the door said. Star, I gasped. Star stood in the doorway, his pistol drawn. Friend or enemy? The colonel turned and pointed his empty pistol at Star. She's right here, Star said, stepping inside. Miss Lana ran toward me, her arms open. Thank God, the colonel murmured as his arms wrapped around me. Thank God. Chapter 28. Didn't see it coming. We waited out the rest of the storm at Mr. Jesse's. Mr. Lana and I settled in on Mr. Jesse's hideous plaid sofa. I couldn't sit close enough, couldn't touch her hand enough, and couldn't hear the sound of her voice enough. She told us how Slate had kidnapped her, how he showed her and the colonel worked together to loosen the colonel's bond so she could escape. When we didn't come back for me, I knew something was wrong, she told the colonel, and when Slate tried to move me, I knew my situation was dire. I attacked. You almost killed me, Slate whined. Maybe next time, Dale muttered. He smiled at Miss Lena. Mo and I mostly captured Slate for you, Miss Lena, he said. Such lovely children, she said, rumpling his hair. You'll get some type of badge for this, I imagine. Probably, he said, blushing. She turned to the colonel. Once I escaped, I made my way to Priscilla's. I assumed Star would be there. Lavender had just called. Lavender? My heart scrabbled around my rib cage like a wild kitten. Yes, sugar, she said. He heard you tell Rose I was in trouble before the phone line went dead. He was finally able to get through to Priscilla and Star. I showed up at their door, windblown and Beldred. Star and I drove to Rose's as soon as we could, only to learn you'd gone to Jesse's on the back road. While we talked, Star cuffed Slate and peered beneath the house. Well, well, what do we have here? He tugged a metal box up from the room. The loot from Mr. Slate's bank robbery, I said, and the source of Mr. Jesse's Saturday night church donations. Why do you say that? The colonel demanded. Because the serial numbers from Mr. Jesse's donation match the cash from the bank robbery, I said, enjoying the shock on Star's face. That's the information Desperado Detectives has anyway. I feel like it will check out. It does check out, Star said, but how did you know? Sorry, I said. We always protect our sources. The colonel frowned. But why is there money under Jesse's house? Because, I said, settling against Miss Lana's arm. Mr. Jesse brought it here after Slate and Dolph Andrews stole it from the bank in Winston-Salem. Mr. Jesse was in on the heist too, right, Slate? Star watched Slate carefully. Actually, Star said, I'm not sure Jesse was in on the heist, but his cousin was. His dead one? Dale asked. That's right. Jesse Tatum's cousin was the guard at the bank. He got shot in the holdup and died a week later. Jesse Tatum at his side. Slate stood trial for his murder, but slick talking attorney got him off. Star dusted his hands off and glanced at the colonel. Sound familiar? The colonel didn't blink. Why would it? He asked. I jumped in before Star could reply. So Mr. Jesse cousin was in on your holdup, I said, studying Slate. He told Mr. Jesse where to find the loot. And then Mr. Jesse wouldn't share. You killed him. That was mean, Dale said, heading for the kitchen. And stupid, I added. Star's gaze moved to the colonel to Slate. Or maybe you killed Jesse just so he couldn't turn you in, Star said. What about it, Slate? Slate scowled. You're all crazy, he said. I didn't kill anybody. Come on, Slate, I said. You might as well tell us before your girlfriend does. Slate glared at me. Pudgy face blinked. What girlfriend? Deputy Marla, I said. That's one that's going to turn state's evidence on you and keep your own cold-blooded self off death row. Slate winced. Never heard of her. Balderdash, Miss Lana said. I saw you with her at Lucy Blacklock's, and I heard her explaining our 3-day rule before you made me call home, the colonel said. He glanced at me. I'm sorry I called you Moses, soldier. I was trying to warn you. Missed it, sir, I told him, but Dale and me didn't miss hearing Slate and Marla talking about our porch just before the storm. I glared at Slate. You're lying. You and Deputy Marla are a thing together. Star scratched his head. You and Marla Everett, he said, sitting on Mr. Jesse's piano bench. He wore the same look Miss Lana wears when she's working a jigsaw puzzle. I have to admit, she had me fooled. Didn't you wonder why Slate was always one step ahead of you, I asked? Who set up roadblocks that didn't work? Who couldn't trace Slate's calls? Who searched the Blacklock place? Deputy Marla. She's been Slate's inside man all along. Dale filed from the kitchen at the bag of cheese puffs. He tipped the bag toward Miss Lana, who shook her head. Only Dale would eat a dead man's snack. Priscilla warned me about Marla, Star muttered. She didn't trust her, especially when it came to you kids. He stood Slate up and walked him to Mr. Jesse's old piano. You and Marla Everett, he said again, anger twisting his voice tight as piano wire. I must be getting old. I never saw that one coming. Poor Joe Star, you are getting old, I said. But don't feel bad. I'm only 11 and I didn't see it coming either. Did you, Dale? Dale shook his head, orange crumbs glistening on his face. But I did know she was a con, detective, and I only known her for a few weeks. Star scuffed Slate to the upright. Colonel, I'd like a word in the kitchen, please, he said, unfolding news clippings from his pocket. Miss Lana went tense beside me. The colonel looked at us, squared his shoulders, and followed Star, who closed the kitchen door firmly behind them. What's going on, Miss Lana? I asked. Everything will be okay, Mo, she said. She took my hand, but her silence stretched like old elastic about to give. I'd never seen her so pale. The kitchen door flew open. This is an outrage, the colonel shouted, storming into the living room. Sir, Star said, the clipping firms everything. I've told you. No matter what the colonel's done, he's innocent, I said, rising. The colonel grabbed the clipping out of Star's hand. This is rubbish, she said. Me? He glared at the news article and then dropped it like it was stained with blood. I stared at the paper. A photograph of a younger, dark-haired colonel filled the page. He wore an expensive suit, a ponytail, and a close-clipped beard. The colonel backed away like he'd seen the devil himself. God help me, he sobbed, sinking into Mr. Jesse's sofa, hiding his face in his hands. I'm a lawyer. Chapter 29. Dear Upstream Mother. The cafe reopened 2 busy weeks later. In those 2 weeks, Miss Lana, Dale, and I repaired the cafe's busted windows, swept the hurricane out of the dining room, and mended the roof. The old sign, No Lawyers, came down. A new sign, Welcome Friends, went up. Miss Rose shocked us twice in those weeks. First by divorcing Mr. McCone, then by starting her own business, a living history tour of the 1930s tobacco farm. She has 2 bus tours a day booked for the rest of summer. Dale told me. He grinned. She didn't want to tell us that she knew it would work out, and until I repaired the trash in the tobacco barn. Other folks were busy too. Slate and Deputy Marlowe were charged with kidnapping the colonel and Miss Lana, and with murdering Mr. Jelsey and Dolph Andrews. Mr. McCone turned state witnesses. Spitz the cat disappeared in the hurricane again, and thus hired desperado detectives again. I'll find him this time, but that's it, Dale said, marking Lost Pets Found B free off of our sign. Lavender come home a hero, but not the way I expected. We learned about Lavender's race the day of the hurricane. The television stations were out, but a voice sputtered through Mr. Jesse's radio. And today at the Sycamore 200, that's Lavender's race, Dale cried. Come on, baby, he whispered, twisting the dial. The station crackled. Dramatic finish, and with me now in the winner's circle, driver of 32 car. That's us, Dale whelped. We won. Lavender won. Here's the driver, Hank Richmond, the announcer said. Hank Richmond? Who's that? I gasped. Hank turned out to be the driver Lavender sold his car to just before the race. A $30,000 bird on his hand is tempting creature. Lavender explained when he got home, he put $1,000 in the bank accounts for Dale and me and handed the rest to Miss Rose. I love building cars, he said. I'll be ready to test a new one by Christmas. What he didn't say was he spent most of his race on the phone with law enforcement trying to get in touch with Joe Starr to help get Miss Lena. And the colonel? The colonel missed it all thanks to Joe Starr. Starr took him to Winston-Salem to unsnarl hosts of legal details and then to the hospital to get checked head to toe. I'll never speak to Joe Starr as long as I live, I told Miss Lena the morning of our grand reopening. She handed Dale and me Moran barrettes, patted her wig into place, and smoothed her shimmering pink dress over her hips. Mo, everything's fine. The colonel needs time to get the details of his life straight and adjust to his memory, she said. And Jemiah's is Jemiah's sugar. What? Dale asked, looking at his barrette like it was roadkill. Never say never, she translated, opening the door. Places, everyone. We were packed by 7 a.m. Bonjour and welcome to La Café Monsieur Mayor, I said, adjusting my barrette. Dale had already stuffed his face behind the jukebox. Bonjour, Mo, he said as he glanced around the room. Eiffel Tower salt and pepper shakers, catty-cornered tablecloths, lightning accordion music. It's nice to be back in Paris, he said. He smoothed his ice pink over his belly, glided across the tiles to the counter seat, and winked at the Azalea woman. Good morning, Anna Celeste, he said. Atilia and her mother sat by a window sucking down the soft-boiled eggs like a couple of well-dressed weasels. I hope you're having a good summer. I am, thank you, Mr. Mayor, she said, tossing her sun-streaked hair. We just got back from Myrtle Beach. It's so nice to get away. I walked by holding a glass of ice water. Suddenly I felt shy. Hey Anna, I'm trying those blue bottles, I told her. Thanks for them and for everything. I smiled at her pinched-faced mother. Breakfast is on the house today, Miss Simpson, I said. Go ahead and eat like you mean it, both of you. Atilia glanced at the glass of water. I suppose that's from Dale, she said. Could you please tell him, I'm sorry, but I'm not thirsty? No problem, I said, especially I thought since it's not for you. She nodded and looked away. A choppy silence stretched between us. Without strife, we had nothing. Too bad you can't go on vacation, Moran, she said finally. You look so, I don't know, deathly pale. Pale's temporary, Atilia, I said, grinning. Putrid is forever. I spun the next table. Hey, Salamander, I said, I appreciate what you did for me, thanks. She smiled and bobbed her head. Breakfast is on the house, I told her. I slid the ice water across the table to her. And Dale sent this over for you, I said, winking. Across the room, Dale put his hands in his pockets and smiled. Sale knocked the glass over, sending a flood towards Skeeter's law book. I just handed them a clump of paper towels, then Lavender strolled in. Morning, Lavender, I said as he sat down with grandmother Miss Lacey Thornton. Morning, Sherlock, he said, flashing me a wicked grin. Sherlock, a pet name? Hey, Dale, Tinks called. How about some coffee over here? Okavos, Dale muttered. Keep your pants on. I drifted to Lavender, order pad in hand. We got 2 specials today, Miss Lena's breakfast souffle and biscuits, red-eye juice. What'll it be? Biscuits are red, he said, stretching his legs out onto the aisle and smiling. Lavender knows how to wear a pair of jeans. When the colonel coming home? I grinned. Any minute now. He's thoroughly bewildered then, Mayor Little asked, and I nodded. I'm glad for you, Mo. I know you've missed him. Grandmother Miss Lacey Thornton said, and I'll have Lana's souffle, dear, if it's not too much trouble. The door swung open. Joe Starr looked around the room, his eyes color of thin winter sky. Table for 2, please, Mo, he said, and I waved him and Miss Russell toward a table by the jukebox, and Miss Lena strolled in from the kitchen. Welcome, friends, she sang, taping a knife against a glass of water until folks settled down. Thank you for coming. There are a few rumors flying around I'd like to address before the colonel gets home. The cafe fluttered itself still. If you've created some interesting stories about the Colonel and me, she smiled, though she wasn't smiling when she first heard them. I don't have time to address each one, so I'll just tell you our true story to set the record straight. Feel free to use my Pepsi crate, Miss Lana, I said. Thank you, sugar, she said, and stepped up on my tiny stage. The Colonel and I met in Charleston 12 years ago, she said. It was love at first sight. We planned to elope and honeymoon in Paris. Ooh la la, Mayor Little said, popping his elbows on the counter. At the time, the Colonel was representing Slate, who was accused of killing a security guard during a holdup. That guard, we now know, was Mr. Jesse's cousin. Thanks to the Colonel, Slate was found not guilty of first-degree murder and convicted only of manslaughter and robbery. As he left the courtroom, he told the Colonel to find his loot and save it, or he'd kill every person connected with the case. The Colonel didn't take him seriously. Slate was going to jail. What could he do? The next morning, the Colonel found his secretary dead. An Azalea woman dropped a glass. Dale sped by with a broom and dustpan. The Colonel never forgave himself, Miss Lana said. He believed his arrogance had cost him that woman her life. No wonder he hates lawyers, Tinks muttered. The Colonel called me that afternoon. Pack your bags, he said. We'll start a new life in Paris. He warned everyone he could think about Slate and set out to meet me, even though the hurricane had just slammed ashore. Along the way, I believe he thought of Jesse Tatum as a detour to his warn him too. The crashed pine, thus murmured, she nodded. When I found him a week later, he held a beautiful baby, and not the first memory of me. She blinked tears back as she stood there, alone, curls framing her face. For an instant, she looked like a photo of herself as a young girl prior to blossoming. I did the only thing I could, she said. I stayed and hoped he would fall in love with me again. Sal dabbed her eyes and thus raised his hands. Who killed the Colonel's secretary? He asked. Slate was in the slammer. Deputy Marla, I guessed, from the corner of my eye. I saw Dale peer out the window and frown. That's my theory too, Star said. Slate came here looking for Jesse Tatum. When Jesse said he didn't have the loot, Slate killed him. Then, when he recognized the Colonel, he hoped he had his money, and he kidnapped Miss Lana to pressure him into giving it up. Only the Colonel didn't remember Slate or the heist. Dale went up on his toes and leaned against the window frame, staring outside. Miss Lana's eyes misted. And that's our story. I deceived you, my friends, she said, but I acted out of love, and I hope you all forgive me. The cafe hung breathless, like a pendulum at the top of its swing. Well, my goodness, Mayor Little said. It's not like any of you have outstanding warrants, is it? They do not, sir, Star said. As the cafe interrupted into cheers, Dale turned to me, waved his arm over my head, and pointed outside. I threaded my way through the crowd. What is it? I asked. Follow me. He barreled through the kitchen to the side door. It's this stupid cat, he said, stuffing cooked bacon in his pocket. He's headed to the creek. We tore through Miss Lana's flower garden to the creek bank. The flood marked the 2 weeks before darkened tree trunks a foot above my head. There he is, Dale said, an orange blur spread through the reeds. Dale took off like a shot. I started after him, but a flash in the creek caught my eye. A bottle bobbled along a slant, and its cap glistened in the sun. Dale, I called as reeds close behind him. I stared at the bottle. Finally, my heart said, finally. It's trash, my mind argued, trash knocked by those storms. I splashed into the creek's black water and scooped up the bottle. Behind me, Spitz the cat yelled. Got him, Dale crowed. My heart went still, and I twisted the cap from the bottle and peered inside. A piece of paper curled there, just like in my dreams. A message? Or was it what I always wanted? Or was it? I pictured the Colonel pulling up from the flood, smoothing a bedroll beneath the stars, sitting at Miss Rosa's table with his forehead resting on his hands. I pictured Miss Lana struggling in her arms full of hurricane candy, walking me to kindergarten, writing Mr. Jesse's eulogy. I pictured him laughing with me and scolding me and teaching me to hold my own at the cafe. Then I tried to picture somebody different. Mo, Dale called. He stood in the bank, cradling Spitz in his arms. Oh, he said, his gaze finding the bottle. I shook the message out and unrolled it. My heart's pounding as the dark water lapped against my knees. My hands shook. The words blurred as I read them. What does it say? Dale asked. I took a deep breath. Dear upstream mother, I read, and my voice floated away. He sloshed into the creek to stand by my side. I'm sorry, Mo. I glanced up as the Underbird wheeled into the parking lot and rocked to the top of the sycamore shade. The Colonel unfolded himself from the car. He stared at the cafe a moment and stretched, the sun kissing his white shirt and short cropped hair. The cafe door banged open. Miss Lana ran toward him, her arms wide open. He scooped her up and whirled her around as friends and neighbors spilled across the parking lot, laughing and crying and then clapping the colonel's back. As I watched them together, my earth found its axis and my stars found their sky. I crumbled the note. Thanks, Dale, I said. I looked at him. Thanks for saying you're sorry, but you know what? I'm not. I splashed to the creek bank and zipped through the garden, Dale at my heels. Colonel, I shouted, welcome home. He and Miss Lana started towards me. Thank you, soldier, he called, opening his arms. It's good to be home. And that is the end of 3 Times Lucky. I hope you guys enjoyed it.